So first, benefits. One of the benefits we get, probably one of the major benefits we get from DevOps, is communication. We don't have as many silos because DevOps sort of absorbs a lot of those. And so we're not dealing with developers doing their thing, testers are doing their thing, operations are doing their thing. DevOps just sort of sits over all of that and says, hey, we will help you out. And so you guys don't have to worry about your platforms, your environments. We are going to own that and help ensure that they are consistent throughout the team or the enterprise. We've talked about a lot of ways that DevOps is a faster way to develop software. We're going to have a shorter time to market. We're going to get stuff out in front of people faster because we're not having to reinvent the wheel when we move from one environment to the next. We've already, through code or whatever else, through automation, we've already got a process for building that out. And so oftentimes it's just a matter of point it at a different location and then press the button and it's off and running. And it's built it up, it deploys the things it needs to deploy, and we have something in front of the users. The reproducibility of it should not be missed. If you've spent any time developing where you've had multiple developers on a team, you've probably run into the situation where, hey, we need this such and such a library or this version of an application or whatever it is. And you spend a lot of time trying to figure out what is it that I have on my machine that you don't have that will allow us to, do that. Hey, it works on my machine, kind of, solve that problem, is to make sure that we have consistency. And it could be as big as, I can say you're a Java developer and you've got, you're running Java 11 and somebody else is running Java 8 and things like that, database versions. And all of these are things that I have run into in the last year, probably multiple times, just because they're common problems, is making sure that everybody's on the same software page, be it libraries or compilers or whatever it is. And actually, in some cases now, it's even operating systems, because your developers, maybe they're on Mac, maybe they're on Windows, maybe they're on Linux, and it's being able to provide a single consistent environment no matter where you're at, so we can get a lot of those head-butting moments of, my thing is not quite configured the same way as yours. How do we get that fixed? Tracking all that down, that goes away. And so that now is time that we can use to work on features and being quicker and getting things to the market. That also combines that we're going to have less downtime. Our maintenance windows can be smaller because we know what we're dealing with. We're not having to worry about, oh, this is a new environment, how's this going to work? And between the scripting and everything else, we are confident that this environment is almost identical, if not effectively identical to the environment we're coming out of. So we don't see environmental change or difference issues as often. And that allows us to, if something's running, we get to the new one, and that one can be running as well. We know that that's going to work because it worked in the other environment. If something crashes in an environment, we're able to just recode, use code and just launch a new instance of it, and we're off and running again. Automation is always going to save us time. Well, in the long run, is always going to save us time, but most importantly, it saves us from errors, from typos and fat-fingered entries and things like that, that when we do it manually, we will see. If we script it, if we automate it, then it becomes a non-issue. And honestly, it can be run as often as you want or whenever you want. So you don't have to have somebody awake at 2 a.m. to run a bunch of scripts. Instead, it just automates it and lets us know. So we'll get a warning if things break. And this, again, there were people that probably, there was night ops, and there still are in some places, but it used to be, there were a lot of night ops people that they would come in at, midnight or whatever and be the operation side, where they're running backups and doing all the different things that need to be done from the operation side. And we can automate that now. So you don't have these people have to come in the middle of the night to do these things manually. We haven't really talked about cons. This has almost been selling you on DevOps, the whole point. So you need to think about also, there's concerns here. One, DevOps is a change. There's no way around it. It is a change to how you do stuff. If you haven't had it before and you add DevOps in, it's a whole different set of skills that people are going to need. There are different roles. There may be different departments. There may be different managements, different processes, the whole thing. You are bringing in a new, you're cutting out of existing groups certain roles and certain responsibilities and using that to create a whole new group. It's a lot of changes, sometimes very sizable, like impactful as far as roles and like management and titles and things like that people can get nervous about. And so it's always going to be a challenge. We're dealing with big change is going to be big work sometimes. DevOps can be expensive. There are, but when you think of the tools, they're not cheap. It's not necessarily cheap to do this automation. And that's not just the tool itself, but the time required, the expertise, the resources that you may have to hire to put these things in place, to the time you're going to have to invest to look at what is it we do. How do we ramp up a DevOps team to the point where they can understand and reproduce our environments? In some cases that, especially if you've been around for a long time building software and you haven't had DevOps, there are situations where you're almost blocked. Building an environment from scratch is, some cases, impossible. I've been in more than a few environments where there is no, like the database, there's really no way to build it from scratch. You just have to back up and restore. That's the only way that you move a database from one to another. I've been in situations where there is source code that has been compiled and built into an executable or a DLL, and then the source code was lost. So you don't have a way really to rebuild some of those pieces. But doing so, so getting yourself to a point where you can do that, that can be time consuming. It can be costly. With all of this, because we are doing things a little differently as far as CI/CD and automation and scripting, there's going to be more tools, probably more like development languages and stuff like that. Your tech stack is going to expand almost always. It's very rare that that doesn't happen, which in itself can be an issue, because now as you have an expanded tech stack, you have to have a broader skill set for your team, or you have to hire a broader team to match those needs. There's a risk to this increased speed. It's just like if you're walking on a sidewalk, a completely healthy, normal, not klutzy person or whatever, but if you run, there is a risk that's incurred, because if something that you don't see shows up last second, you have more momentum. It's harder to change your pace, and there is a risk to that. That's why you don't run with scissors. Things like that. When you move faster, there is a risk involved. And actually, when you automate stuff, there is it's sometimes referred to as versus the difference between having a gun where you could shoot yourself in the foot versus having a shotgun where you can blow your whole leg off. Automation tools sometimes do that, is they give us the ability to, while we can fail fast because of the automation, we will see it quickly. Sometimes we also are going to fail bigger because those scripts propagated stuff further. And you also have, because the DevOps group, and this is a particular one that developers can complain about at times. If you do it completely, then the DevOps group is essentially controlling the development environments. They're saying, here you go, here's a script for it. If you need to change it, then you need to let us know so we can incorporate that into our scripts so that can propagate through to testing and to production. That means there are situations where you could have your development team down because some tool is down. Another good example is the pros and cons when you think of developers not working on a local machine, but having a VM that they work on. If those VMs are unavailable or the network's down so they can't get to them, they're down. They are not going to be productive. And so there's definitely a risk to all of this. And there's the rewards, but there's also risks to doing so. And then while you may think, looking at it just off the top of your head, say, wow, this should probably be pretty easy to scale. Scaling up based on the automation and the infrastructures of code and things like that is pretty good. But when you have to use that across multiple projects in complex environments, it can be quite a challenge. And when you think about like just that developer example I used is another one where you may have a development team that you've got, it's very big. So you've got Windows developers, you have Apple developers, you have people in web development languages, you have people doing mobile development, and all of these are different languages, different tools, and different environments. If you push it back on developers and they just sort of figure it out and they make it work. When you have DevOps, that means they have to find a way to get all of these things to be scripted, to work, to integrate with each other. It becomes more complex and can be very challenging, particularly from a cost-effective point of view, because sometimes it is easier or more reproducible to have these specialized individual environments that you've scripted out, as opposed to you may have these like, I don't know, almost like Frankenstein environments that can occur when you have these developers working on a lot of different tools at a time, and they're able to do it because they've got all of these libraries and everything in place, and they just made it work, as opposed to having to do it and reproduce it. There's sometimes it's going to take longer. Doing a one-off is almost always going to be faster than doing something where you need to be able to reproduce it. So that's another concern when you get to big, complex environments. So in this little summary overview, what should we take away from this? Well, one, DevOps is pretty new. Worst case, it's 15 maybe-ish years old. It's a new way to think about software development, and it has come from, though, very consistent ways to produce software in the past. People have seen that we need a development environment, we need a testing environment, we need a production environment, and we need to keep those sort of in silos and make sure that we'll call them clean environments in each of those areas. So it's new. It's a different way to think about software development. It's powerful. We're talking about automation, we're talking about scripting, but it can be very complex. When you look at some of these scripts, even just like a simple Docker script can seem like, oh, this will be great. It's awesome. But if you wanted to pull in a certain version of a language and then certain libraries and versions for that language as well, and you've got to set up certain structures and maybe put a database and certain files, and it can start getting complex quickly. You will find that, yes, whenever you have the ability to configure stuff heavily, then it can take a while to configure it properly. As we looked in the pros and cons part, automation can go a long way towards helping us, but and it can reduce errors, but it can also be almost like a crutch. And we have to make sure that we are validating that automation along the way, so that we don't automate our way into a lot of damage that needs to be redone. A good example in the database world is the idea of deleting one record is one thing, but if you've got these scripts that are going out and trying to figure out all these records to delete, you could delete your entire database before if you have a couple typos in there in the wrong place. This has been done a lot. There are a lot of teams and people and some very smart people that have been doing DevOps for over a decade now. But even at this point, even with all these tools and the advances and you will see there are steady advances. Like this month, it's going to be different from next month as far as what's available out there. but there's a lot of pros and cons to the world of DevOps. Questions and comments?
That was pretty good, Rob.
Yes, it was. But so do you need pretty much like the skill set, since this is kind of a new, I'll call it a phenomenon, software development in companies, like do you need to train, since we kind of used in the old way of developing software, like do this without the DevOps, like does somebody need the skill set for the DevOps? It's pretty much automatic, like somebody can just pick it just like that.
Oh no, it's definitely there's definitely a skill set to it. It is currently probably I think it's probably an area that is most, I'd say, impacted by certification programs and certificates, because there's not really, it's young enough that I don't know that there's schools that have, DevOps degrees, but there are definitely tool specific DevOps kinds of things you can get. If you go out and do a certification in Google or Azure or AWS, there is going to be, for the ones I've seen at least, there's going to be some level of DevOps that are part of that, part of using those environments and being able to automate and configure those. And there are definitely certificates that are built around a lot of these tools and how to automate and code your way into environments. So it is a different tool set, a different skill set, a different experience and focus. A lot of the DevOps people have come out of configuration management and even some of the development world, but it's definitely not developer skills. There's coding involved, but it's a different type of coding that I don't know, and I don't know how much coding skills would translate over to DevOps, because DevOps it really is more of a hardware kind of a perspective on the world as opposed to software, because you're thinking about memory and resources like that, and space and processing and those kinds of things that you don't really think about normally in the development world. Other questions and comments?
With that said, though, one thing to think about, though, with the containerization, like Docker, more cloud-based, a lot of it is, I want to say, more VM. So you're thinking a little bit more in a virtual sense than you are a hardware sense. But it's kind of both. It's a different type of resource collection and kind of resource allocation, so to speak. Yeah.
There's definitely a crossing of those lines. You're thinking the same way you would if you were building hardware. It's just you don't have to do it physically. You're just doing it now in a virtual machine. It's the same thing as if you had to price a server 20 years ago, you're going to look at things like, okay, how many processors am I going to need? How much memory do I need? How much disk space do I need? If you want to get complex, how much power supply do I need to do this? Things like that. Now, you still have essentially a lot of those same concerns. It's just you're not thinking about it from a hardware point of view, and you're able to do it almost more a la carte than you would have in the past. Other questions and comments? All right. So as always, thanks for listening in, for following along. Always appreciate and are thankful for the time that you guys give. Just for us, it gives us an excuse to learn some more stuff for yourselves, to make the industry better, to become a better developer. If you have questions, you can always shoot an email at info@developernoir.com. Throw something out on the contact us form on developernoir.com. We have a YouTube channel. If you look up Developer Noir, spell it right, you'll see we've got, I don't know, 200 videos out there now, something like that, and growing every week. Vimeo, we've got a lot of the same. YouTube are smaller or shorter format, 15 to 20 minutes typically. Vimeo can run an hour or more on some of those. And we still have somewhere out there, facebook.com. We've got a developer page if you would like to, throw anything out there and give us feedback as well. As always, thank you for your investment in yourself and helping us with our goal of making every developer better. Have a good one.